Jack, Rocky, and Benny continued their adventures, enjoying every moment together. However, as with any story, challenges soon came their way that would test their friendship, strength, and determination. One day they decided to go camping in the mountains to spend a weekend in nature. Jack had prepared everything they needed: tents, food, and water, while Rocky and Benny were eager to explore new trails. The next morning they got up early, loaded everything into the motorcycle, and hit the road. The mountains beckoned them with their majestic scenery, and soon they reached the spot where they were going to camp. Jack chose a picturesque clearing surrounded by trees and with a beautiful view of the lake. They began to set up the tent, and Jack felt joy fill his heart. He was happy that he could spend time with Rocky and Benny away from the hustle and bustle of the city. When they were done setting up camp, Jack decided it was time to go for a walk. He knew there were many interesting trails in the neighborhood, and he wanted his friends to be able to enjoy the fresh air and new smells. They started up the trail and soon found themselves surrounded by beautiful woods. But soon they came across an obstacle. A fallen branch blocked the path. Jack realized that they would have to go around the place. He was confident that Rocky and Benny could handle any difficulty, and they continued on their way, bypassing the obstacle. Not long afterward, however, the weather began to change. The sky became cloudy and the wind increased. Jack looked at his dogs and decided it would be best to return to camp before the rain started. He knew it was necessary to ensure the safety of his friends. As they made their way back down, it began to rain. At first it was a light drizzle, but soon the rain intensified and the sky erupted with thunder. Jack tried to remain calm, but his heart beat faster. He didn't want Rocky and Benny to feel afraid. When they finally reached the campground, the tent was already starting to leak water. Jack quickly closed the entrance, but soon realized that it wasn't going to stop raining. The wind was picking up, and he realized that the storm could linger. He gathered his dogs and reassured them by stroking their heads. "It's going to be okay, guys," he said, trying to be reassuring. "We just have to wait it out." Soon, however, the wind became so strong that Jack realized the tent might not hold. He made a decision. They needed to move to a more sheltered location. He took Rocky and Benny and walked out of the tent, trying to be careful. Amidst the heavy rain and wind, they began to look for shelter. Jack knew there was an old cabin in the woods that he had seen in the past. He hoped they could get to it before the weather got worse. Jack encountered difficulties along the way. A powerful wind was knocking them off their feet, and the rain was making visibility difficult. He felt fear creeping into his soul, but realized he had to be strong for the sake of his dogs. Rocky and Benny walked beside him, their devotion giving him strength. Finally, they saw the cabin. Jack pushed open the door with relief and stepped inside, closing it behind him. The hut was old, but it provided protection from the rain and wind. Jack quickly looked around the room and found several blankets. He threw them over Rocky and Benny to keep them warm. Once the storm blew outside the cabin, Jack realized they could stay here for a while. He sat down on the floor next to the dogs and began to reassure them. "We're safe, guys," he said as he hugged his four-legged friends. Several hours passed and the storm didn't subside. Jack began to worry about what to do next. He knew they would need to return to camp, but he didn't know when it would be safe to do so. He also realized that they had limited food and water. Meanwhile, he began to think about what they could do to improve the situation. He remembered that he had some spare provisions in his backpack. Jack pulled out some food and water to share with Rocky and Benny. "Let's eat and wait out the storm. It'll subside," he said, trying to remain optimistic. As they ate, Jack thought about the importance of being prepared for adversity. He realized that life was full of unexpected twists and turns, and it was at times like these that one had to pull himself together and show resilience. He knew that his dogs relied on him and he had to be strong for their sake. Time passed, and although the storm continued, Jack felt that they could overcome this challenge together. He began to tell Rocky and Benny stories about his travels and how he always found a way out of difficult situations. He laughed as he recalled funny moments, and his dogs listened to him as if they understood every word. Finally, the wind began to die down and the rain gradually stopped. Jack looked out the window and saw that the sky was beginning to clear. He felt his heart fill with hope. "Let's check to see if everything is okay," he said, getting to his feet. They stepped out of the cabin and saw that the forest had been badly damaged. Branches and leaves were lying everywhere, and some trees were broken. However, Jack was thankful that they were safe. He looked at Rocky and Benny, and they seemed glad to be back in the fresh air. Jack knew they needed to go back to camp to check on the tent and decide what to do next. With Rocky and Benny by his side, he felt he could handle any difficulties. They started down the trail back toward the campground. When they arrived, Jack saw that the tent was damaged but still standing. He quickly started packing up his things, trying to do it as quickly as possible. Rocky and Benny helped him, sniffing around as if checking for safety. After packing, Jack decided that the best thing to do was to leave this place and go home. He realized that this was a good lesson in how quickly the weather could change and how important it was to be prepared for the unexpected. He knew, too, that with his loyal friends by his side, they would be able to overcome any challenge. On the way back, Jack felt his spirit strengthen. He realized that despite the difficulties, they had overcome the challenge together and had done so with determination and courage. He smiled as he looked at Rocky and Benny and realized that there would always be trials in life, but it was each other's friendship and support that helped them get through them. When they got home, Jack felt full of energy and ready for new adventures. He knew that life was full of surprises, and with each new day, he would continue to appreciate each moment, realizing that they were what made his life special. After Jack, Rocky, and Benny survived the storm in the cabin, they were left with the joy of being rescued, but also the fatigue of their ordeal. They returned home, and Jack felt physically and emotionally drained. Even though the storm had subsided, he couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety. For several days after their return, Jack continued to feel unwell. At first, he put it down to fatigue and stress, but soon the symptoms began to increase. He had a fever, headache, and weakness. He tried to ignore the ailment, but soon realized that it wasn't just fatigue. One morning he woke up and his condition worsened. He felt like his body was failing him, and when he looked in the mirror, he saw a pale face and darkened eyes. "It's probably just the flu," he thought, but soon realized he needed to get help. Jack called his friend who was a doctor and told him about his symptoms. "I'll come to you," the friend said, and Jack could hardly wait for him to arrive. During this time, Rocky and Benny were nearby, looking at him with concern, and Jack felt their support. When the friend finally arrived, he examined Jack and ran some tests. "You have a severe viral illness," he said, frowning. You need to rest a lot and drink fluids. I've prescribed some medication. You need to take care of yourself. Jack felt anxiety sweep over him. He knew he needed time to recover, but he thought about how his absence might affect Rocky and Benny. He didn't want to leave them alone, but realized that the most important thing right now was to take care of his health. Don't worry, Jack, his friend said, noticing his anxiety. I'll help you. Make sure you don't overload yourself. Rocky and Benny will be around and they'll help you stay in good spirits. With those words, Jack felt a little relief. He started taking his medication and tried to rest as much as possible. However, the illness was still making itself felt. He felt weak and tired. Every day, Jack became more and more vulnerable. He lay on the couch, looked at his dogs, and realized that it was their presence that helped him cope with his illness. Rocky and Benny stayed close to him, wagging their tails and nuzzling into him as if trying to transfer their energy and love. One day when Jack woke up from another bout of weakness, he noticed Rocky looking at him with concern. "Don't worry, buddy," he said, trying to smile. "I'll be better soon." Rocky scooted closer in response and laid his head in his lap, as if realizing that his master needed support. Jack remembered how much the moment spent with Layla, Rocky, and Benny had meant to him. Every moment he felt the warmth of their love was priceless to him. He realized that even in the most difficult times, it was important to remain open to love and support. Time went on, and although the illness wouldn't let Jack go, he tried to find small joys in each day. He enjoyed the way Rocky played with Benny, how they had funny scuffles, and how they could just sit next to each other, creating a cozy atmosphere. These moments helped him cope with the bitterness of his illness. One day, when Jack was feeling particularly bad, he looked at his dogs and said, "You are my family. I don't know what I would do without you." He realized that love and friendship were of the utmost importance, and it gave him strength. There were days in his condition when he felt better and days when he couldn't get off the couch. But even in his most difficult moments, he always found support in his loyal friends. Rocky and Benny were there for him, and that gave him hope that he would get better. Time passed and Jack gradually began to get better. He continued to take his medication, drink plenty of fluids, and tried to move around the house to stay in shape. Every day he could feel his strength being restored and it filled him with joy. When he was finally able to, Benny wagged their tails happily, as if realizing that their master was getting back on his feet. Jack decided it was time to get back into his routine. He started going out for short walks with Rocky and Benny, gradually increasing the distance. These walks were a real treat for him, and he could feel the fresh air filling him with energy. Each day, Jack grew stronger and stronger. He knew that the ordeal had made him more resilient and confident. He began writing about his experience on his blog, sharing his thoughts on the importance of valuing health and supporting each other through difficult times. "I've learned not only to appreciate every moment, but also to realize how important it is to have the support of those around you," he wrote. "Sometimes life puts challenges in front of us, But it is at times like these that we find true strength and support in friendship. Soon Jack made a full recovery and was back to his regular routine. He continued to help out at the shelter and organize events for homeless animals. He knew his ordeal had made him more empathetic to the suffering of others, and now he wanted to share his experiences, inspiring people to care for their pets and help those in need. With Rocky and Benny by his side, Jack felt that with each new day, their friendship only grew stronger. He learned to appreciate not only the moments of happiness, but also the days when life presented him with challenges. He realized that challenges make us stronger, and it is through them that we can truly appreciate joy and love. And with each new step they took together, Jack knew that new adventures full of happiness, love, and friendship were ahead.